So, first of all, welcome back today. It's Dustin again. I'm joined by my dear friend, my dear friend from the Big Easy, Traci Nicole Smith. She is here. She has a lot of wisdom. She is good people, and she's a real asset to what we do in education and all over the board. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Traci, and I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Traci Nicole Smith, and I'm coming from New Orleans. 73 degrees, breezy, sunny. It's a beautiful day, and we will take every day that is not humid. We will stay outside as long as we can. So, hoping that you have great weather and great health. I'm a public educator for 22 years, and I retired. And I say retired because everyone thinks, oh, you cashed in your retirement. I physically left the profession in December of 2018 because I was done. And then I went to LSU Med School, and I'm a residency coordinator in the Department of Surgery. And I work for these great trauma surgeons, and I do a lot of the same type of thing with compliance, like special education. And now I joined Twitter about 7 months ago, and Dustin was a pretty early on friend. And now I'm back, and my passion for education has kind of been revived because I have found my people. When I was in public education for 22 years, especially the last 6 or 7, I really started to feel like I was on an island, and I really started to feel as if everyone had drunk the Kool-Aid and I drank the Kool-Aid and nothing happened. And so I would go in meetings and people would be talking about data, and they would be talking about test scores and, you know, all these things they could do to get the kids to score better. And as a veteran educator, and especially with my roots in public education, I have a PhD in special education. So, you know, my passion is public education, but specifically special education. I always felt like I was on an island. And Dustin was one of the first special education teachers that I met. And every time I would follow someone, I would see there were more people that were feeling like me than not like me. And most of them are still in the profession. I teach at Ball State University as an instructor in their autism graduate program. That's part-time. And so I'm still in the profession per se, but I'm not in the classroom or in a public education building.
Well, fantastic. Well, thank you for the introduction. I love people that are advocates of public education. It is the best thing we can give to our students. Now, you mentioned that you felt like you were on an island. And I know as a teacher, and what I tell others is that feeling like you're on an island is one of the most dangerous things a teacher can be on, because a teacher needs that support system. They need those people that they can go to. What made you, or what caused you to feel like you were on an island, and what were some of the emotions that were going through your head during that period?
I think that the accountability system that really came into the forefront in 2012 with the Common Core State Standards, that was the beginning of it for me. I was out of the classroom about 4 years at the time, and we started going to workshops to learn about the Common Core State Standards. And then it became political. So it became, because of the administration at the time, the people who didn't like the president became very much polarized against the people who are trying to make changes. I think the spirit of Common Core State Standards, wanting to have all the states have a common standard that they look at for students, is a good thing. I think that it's not that it was rooted in evil or hate, but I think that it was just rooted in a lot of misconception about what school should be. So I would go to all these meetings, and everybody would be talking about standards and curriculum and pacing guides and prescriptions for how to write questions and standardized tests. And here I'm a special education first teacher for many years, and then I was a coach, and then I moved up to a strategist, and then finally created my own program. So when Common Core came, I was still at the instructional strategist level. I had gone up from like coach to then the next level. And I felt like, first of all, in special education, we use data all the time, but we use it really meaningfully. It really is how we make interventions, how we assess progress. And it's not the dog and pony show. It's really like for us to drive what we're going to do to help our students meet goals that they need to be successful in life. Here I am in these meetings and everyone's talking all this jargon, talkity talk, and everybody's shaking their head and chiming in. And I'm just sitting there like, I have no alignment to this. I have no personal investment. And if anything, this is exactly against what I'm against. I am not for this. It just seems like everyone is like, this is the box. Let's start putting all the kids in the box. And these are the rules for the box. And if the kid doesn't fit, then we're just gonna like force the kid in the box. And then I think what made it even worse was the push for inclusive education without the buy-in from the general ed teachers. So the general ed teachers would have these inclusion students without like the co-teacher or the teacher's aide or any training. And so then they would tell me, I didn't sign up for this. I didn't go to school to teach these kids. And so then it became your kids, my kids, but in the meetings, it was our kids. So there was some hypocrisy that I didn't care for. I became feeling like very much like no one understands me. An amazing educator that I worked with, Christina Johnson, who taught gifted kids, she and I would have these amazing conversations. And one day she finally said, I understand what you're saying, Traci, and I agree with you, because I kept telling her that our students needed skills. If you had an IEP or a 504 plan, that you had skill deficits. And she kept saying the standards drive the curriculum because that's what she was taught. She finally understood that you cannot just say one size fits all. But our team was split and she went into another direction. And so the one sort of person that came on my island with me left. And then it was just like a new superintendent, and then they wiped out everything the other superintendent did. And my emotions that I felt were, I was having fun in the classroom when I was a classroom teacher. I had so much fun. I didn't have to justify field trips as meaningful and educational and write questions about what I could do at the zoo. I could just take my kids to the zoo and have that authentic experience drive the education instead of like forcing this educational curriculum in this natural environment. And I just started feeling like I would see a lot of hypocrites. I would see people who complained about their principal, but then would get a raise and they would get a promotion and they would become an assistant principal, and the exact things that they didn't like seeing with their principal or their assistant principal, they started doing to their teachers. I wasn't raised that way because my dad is a doctor, and when he went through residency, he was miserable. When he became a medical academician who taught people how to be anesthesiologists, he said, I never want them to go through what I went through. That's what I learned. So I always took like, please, if I can do anything to make your life easier and you not feel what I felt when I was in the classroom, that people were resentful of my students or I was out on an island, please let me know what I could do to help you. Now we make materials for teachers and surprise them and bring them to their classroom. But in the end, corruption from Katrina came in, and corruption from people burying things because they were jockeying for a better high paying position, or they felt entitled to a higher paying position because they paid their dues. That's what pushed me out the door.
Yeah, you really hit
I
on
was
a
very
lot of, yeah, you really hit on a lot of points. And I know that, you still feel the after effects of Katrina even 15 years from now. When I finished high school in 2009, one of our assistant principals was from Louisiana, or from the southern part of Louisiana, and Katrina displaced him and his family, and he was able to reinvent and get his career going in the Kansas City area. So one of the things that you mentioned was how teachers resented the fact that they were having our special education students in the classroom and they weren't getting that support. What are some of the ways that you would try to provide that support to them and try to talk with them and help them teach these students?
Well, let me give a little background and then I'll give you some information. The background on that is we had a guy in the district, which was about an 88 school district, and now they've added schools and taken away schools. So that's a flexible number, but it's around 80. His whole job was to look at numbers and say, this many students, this many paraprofessionals, this many students, this many teachers, without looking at the dynamic of the individual, of the student. This student was a static, flat number. They weren't a dynamic individual. They didn't have characteristics, traits, anything. So in the teacher's defense, they were promised things that they never got, or they had things and they were taken away. One of the things, one of the like 2 or 3 superintendents ago did is he found out that you could have 2 paraprofessionals, one paraprofessional for 2 classrooms. So he started pulling and cutting paraprofessionals. So now we have all these students with IEPs that have massive needs in classes that were only meant to be 36 maximum, that were sitting with 48, 50 students in a middle school with all of these needs unsupported. So I don't think that it's fair to ever like give a story without giving both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they were resentful, and you are responsible for your behavior, and you're responsible for how you vent and communicate that frustration. However, they were also very mistreated and they were very lied to. And so that comes, if you're a veteran and you have 30 years, you probably have 30 years worth of betrayal. So you can imagine the amount of animosity. But how I supported them is I tried to have successful classrooms that did co-teaching. And I'll give you 2 examples. One was a kindergarten that was, in kindergarten, there's probably a lot of students with different needs that haven't been identified because their disability isn't severe enough to warrant like early intervention and maybe hasn't presented itself all the way. So there were 2 teachers at a school, very high poverty area, that had an amazing principal who unfortunately passed away a few years ago, and we were all devastated about it. They had 2 kindergarten teachers with 26 students each. What they did is they combined their classrooms and they had 52 students in there at the same time with 2 teachers. And what they did is they had group activities in the morning and centers, and then based on need of what the student needed, they would have the other classroom with centers and different activities and pull them out and work with them individually to try to meet their needs. So I would try to send visitors there. I would call the principal and I would get permission. And if I was able to, and most of the time I would bring people to their classroom. I would ask the teachers, I would love to show off what you're doing. Can I please, show off? And these teachers were Powers and Palmisano. So they were my, wonder kindergarten teachers. And I use that example because they didn't have traditional special education students in there that had IEPs that were, say, more severe. Maybe they had speech only or, students like that. But they decided that because of their diverse backgrounds, that they probably had lagging skills, which is different than special education, right? They didn't have the exposure. And so they just did this, 52 students, And of course, they had lots of structure. They had lots of, routines in there. They had lots of procedures. So it worked. And these are not kids like you would go in and say, oh, it's these like, little wealthy kids that are used to. No, I mean, we're talking a high poverty area, and it worked. The other classroom was a third grade, or was it fourth grade? It was a fourth grade in our highest poverty school that had been blown away by Katrina and was in trailers. Okay, at this point, there were two teachers, Melina and Market. And what they did is they took their 66 kids and they did the same thing where they did whole group, but the teachers would team teach. And so they got instruction on what team teaching is. And team teaching is literally like both teachers, because Margaret was the special education teacher and Melina was the regular teacher. They had equal responsibility for the content, equal responsibility for teaching, equal responsibility for the planning, and there was no power struggle. And so you would watch them, and it was like magic. I had people from all over the district coming to watch them just because I would talk about them, and they were like, oh my gosh. And they both went on to bigger and better things just because of their willingness to try it out. But little things I did that made a big difference is I would be in a classroom and I would see one tiny little thing, like a new teacher had all her kids all over the carpet and they were rolling around, and just the little common sense things. Make little squares on the carpet and have them stay in that. So it went from kids like rolling all over the place to like staying in their little square and feeling like, hey, this is mine, to like making like two-sided mats for math. And I would go and I would get construction paper from central office and I would glue these mats together and run them through the laminating machine. And I would make materials. That meant so much to them that I took the time to just invest in the little things that they needed that they didn't have. That built the relationship for me. And then at the schools, what I would do is give the co-teaching model. So I would say, okay, here's co-teaching, and then here's like one teach, one assist, and here's like the teacher and the paraprofessional, and one teach, one observes. And we would look at it and say, like, when should you use this model and when should you use that model? And some paraprofessionals didn't want to do team teaching. They didn't want to have that equal responsibility, but one teach, one assists. If the teacher doesn't treat the para like they're an assistant, the children learn to equally respect the teacher and the para as equals, but the para doesn't feel insecure that maybe they didn't go to college and they don't have the skills. And the teacher is not using like, I went to college and I know better than you. Let me tell you something. Do you know how many times my para saved my behind? And I have a PhD. So, there's no ego here. Common sense goes a long way. The school of hard knocks, or I've done this a million times and this is what works. So the real key to like the special education struggle is you have to get rid of your ego, and then you have to get rid of ownership. And if you're going to say our students, you better mean it, because our students is everyone. It's not just the students you handpick, because you don't want your scores to go down. That creates a lot of horribly competitive energy that transcends to the students. Believe me, they feel it.
In fact, those are all great points. One of the things that I can even say is that as someone who co-teaches, the first thing is that it takes two to tango. So with me and the other teachers that I co-teach with, we plan every day. We plan it out to a T. And there's a number of different models that we use. Now, when I am going to teach with someone, yes, I need to know how they are as a teacher, because, in all sense, all teachers are territorial. We all have our quirks. If you come into my room, you're going to find that it's really clean. I'm kind of a clean freak, and I'm kind of structured with things. I need to know how a teacher is as a person, because I'm going to be working with this person. I want to see what they're interested in. I want to be able to build that vibe with them. I've been very fortunate to work with a number of different teachers who, I would go out and who I could go out and just shoot the breeze with. And I worked with some that I didn't care for as a person, but at the same time, I'm a professional and I have a job to do. So we were able to make it work, in the classroom setting. And the kids would have no idea that me and that teacher, you know, quite honestly didn't like each other. And that's okay. I'm an adult, I can take it. And so there's a number of different models that, that I've co-taught with. We have our partner system where it's me and the other teacher, and we're just teaching together. We're on the same page. We know exactly what we're going over. We have the one teach, one assist. It may be his or her day or hers day to run the class and I'm helping out, or vice versa. We also have different models where, especially with our larger classes, we'll break them in half. Half of them will come to my room and half will stay in their room, and we're teaching the exact same thing. If we're doing any sort of rotations, if we have 6 groups, 3 of them will be working on one thing, and then we'll rotate in both rooms. So there's a number of different ways that you can do it, but it just takes a lot of trust. It takes time and it takes effort. But when it works, it really, really works. And so very fortunate the people that I work with were able to do that. And I know it's working because I have general education students who will ask me questions, or when it comes to parent teacher conferences, they'll come see me. So they see me as, the regular education teacher rather than, oh, it's Mr. Pearson, he teaches SPED. So they see us on equal playing fields.
I mean, I think you just illustrated like the most important point. You can get textbooks, you can buy some of the people who go around with all the traveling companies and put on workshops. You can buy their book and get the latest lingo, jargon. But just like you said, it's just really finding what works for you based on your lesson, based on your personalities. And it's really not about the traditional, like, oh, this is the co-teaching model. You have to be flexible, and you also have to have a rapport. The issues I've seen with the co-teaching is that someone thinks that they're smarter than someone else, or someone thinks because they're a general ed teacher that they're better than the special ed teacher, or the para is just a para. A para is not just a para. A para is your angel in the
Oh, yeah.
classroom that helps you, that guides you, that organizes you, that's sort of like the wind beneath your wings. So I just think that the largest issue in the co-teaching special education world is ego. And with ego comes, like you said, territorialism. And yeah, there's some people that I just don't like. The people that I don't like are hypocrites or people who are two-faced. If I'm a hypocrite, I'm going to call myself out and say, I know I'm being a hypocrite, but now I understand this better. So now I'm calling myself out instead of just being a hypocrite. I just find it very interesting that I worked in North Carolina after Katrina and Louisiana, and I just find there's so much gossip and there's so much like unnecessary competitiveness and all of this focus on other people and being jealous, and this person's husband is a doctor and they don't know why they have to work, and all of that is irrelevant. Or the other kind of jealousy, which is like somebody's always doing really well with the test scores, and then people are like, they don't teach, they just teach the test. Focus on what's in your control and in your classroom. And if you put your energy on the students that you are the steward of, that you are curating their education, I promise you that all that stuff isn't going to matter. What's going to matter is that you are doing the best that you can to educate children with the materials and resources that you have.
Absolutely. And so you talk about this jealousy. where do you think this comes from? Why do you think this is prevalent in many places? And probably it's prevalent in every building, you know, if you look close enough. But why do you think this is? And do you think it's become more mainstream than in years past?
I think there are two causes of that. One is I think a lot of people have a lot of childhood trauma that they haven't resolved. And there was an interesting discussion the other day on Twitter about can you take feedback? And what I said in response to that was, I can take feedback from someone who's self-reflected, but I am not going to take feedback from somebody who's like a walking defense mechanism that's projecting all of their insecurities onto other people in the form of criticism. So somebody that I know that has done a lot of introspection, if they want to give me feedback, I'm more than willing to take it. But if not, I'm not interested. So I think, the childhood wounds is one. I think the accountability system is another one. And with the accountability system, we have leaders. And let me just say, on Twitter, I have read the most amazing Twitters from superintendents, principals, and assistant principals. So again, very humbled by the greatness of these leaders that come on this platform, and they're the exact leaders that I would have wanted. But with that said, there are a lot of leaders that create that in their schools. When you're calling out teachers and allowing them to leave early on a Friday because their kids all scored 80% or better basic, what do you think what kind of atmosphere do you think that creates? Of course that creates. And then you have field trips for the kids who scored basic or higher. What about my students? That test is not designed. A test is supposed to be a measure of what you know and understand. That test is not designed for our students in special education. So they're never going on that field trip. So what you've done is you've created self-loathing in the kids, and you created competition among the staff. Oh, well, your kids didn't get basic and above and mine did, so I get to leave. And you watch your coworkers go out the door while you're sitting there with your computer, and you have to rewrite this test because your kids aren't good enough and you're not good enough. That is so unacceptable. That is not leadership. That is not leadership, and that person should not be leading. You clearly have some big internal issues. You should never be leading adults or children in a building if you're creating that. I think those are the two big things. Is the accountability system has definitely, it's created some of this, because it's like panic of, oh my gosh, and I'm going to get fired if I don't do this, and I'm not good enough, and everyone's going to know. And where I'm just like, okay, I mean, just another thing, and it's very sad to me, because it doesn't have to be that way.
It is. And so, why do you think they create these things? And I know just how passionate you are about these and how knowledgeable. What were these conversations like with administration when you would have, say, students go on these field trips and your students are not, or weren't able to go? What were these conversations like? And is this more of an administrator, kind of pumping their chest? Is it, where do you think their motivation is for this?
Well, first of all, I think the accountability system has been there for a long time, but I think when 1983, A Nation at Risk came out during the Reagan administration, that showed sort of like this big achievement gap. I think that's the genesis of the current system, even though it goes far back. As far as what you're saying, I have, pretty much taken on everybody. I went to the deputy superintendent with a list of everything that we were doing wrong in special education. This is a true story. The next month, he retired. I flipped out. I emailed him and said, did I cause this? And he said, meet me at Starbucks after school. And he said, no, you did not cause this, but it was the icing on the cake. When he saw that everything that he was trying to do for years, and then here's somebody very clearly communicating things, and, just very glaring problems that he knew were there, but gave examples. And oh, I forgot to say this. He and I went around to different schools and he saw it for his own eyes. So we spent a whole day together driving to certain schools that I recommended. Some were like, these teachers are superstars and this principal is awesome, like my friend Colleen Winkler. And then there was other places where I wrote a story about this. A principal set up the assistant principal for test fraud. And yeah, so then we went to his school. So, you know, it comes from this place of the accountability within. People are not willing to look within and to make those decisions about how they're going to change themselves. For me, I did everything that I could possibly do. And when I felt like everything was kind of closing in, I left because I didn't want to put that energy of I feel defeated into the world. So I left.
So just to kind of go with that, when you left, you had time to reflect. What were you able to reflect on? What are some of the things you did well on? And what are some of the things, you know what, maybe I could have done better with this? Because that's the great thing about this. Whenever you leave something, you're able to reflect on it.
You know, it's funny that you asked me this question because I just got this nice little bracelet today from my neighbor that says manifest. She made it for me for a story that I wrote. But, you know, I told her that every boss that I've ever worked for has never come down on me or gotten mad at me, because every time something goes wrong, and I'll tell you something that went wrong. When I was a special ed coordinator at a school in 2011, I went to a meeting where the district person appeared before us and told us the date for alternative assessments when they were due. And I wrote the date down and then I planned everything around it. Well, the date was actually 5 days sooner. So I never went to the website for the state and checked it out for myself. And that's what a smart person would do. But a trusting person that I am sometimes listened to him, and he had the date wrong. And we scored like 7 zeros because of me. So I was so devastated, so beating myself up, just torturing myself. And so my boss, who actually we're still friends to this day, I went to him and I told him, and he said, okay, we'll take the zeros. And I said, I know I should have, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I was trying to carry it out. And he's like, no, we'll take the zeros. Don't worry about it. And later he told me when we were off campus that I'm so hard on myself and I'm so good at like identifying what I did wrong that he didn't have the heart to come down on me and say like, why didn't you? He's like, I wanted to yell at you. Like, why didn't you? He's like, but you were so upset and you took it so to heart that you had done something to hurt the school that I didn't have the heart to come down on you. So, you know, the lesson in that is like, check out everything yourself, you know, don't take someone else's word. But what I did well was the last job that I had was a charter school, and I built my own special education program. And all of the kids who were wronged by the big district, they all started coming to me, and some of the families knew me and some of the families talked about me. And I righted so many wrongs. And I'm going to give you an example of one of the wrongs that I righted. There was a little girl, and I'm not going to say her name, but I'll say her initials, JR. JR was the cutest, most loveliest little girl. She was in 7th grade. Her mother raised her in northern Louisiana, but her stepmother and father got her in New Orleans. Her stepmother said, I think she has the wrong diagnosis. And I tried to tell, ironically, the principal who set my friend up for test fraud, him. And instead of fixing the problem, which was she was labeled specific learning disability, but the mother thought that there was something more along the lines of intellectual disability, he just shoved her in a class with a bunch of kids who had intellectual disability. So this little girl tried to commit suicide, true story. And they found out about the charter school, and then they found out about me. And so I said, we will absolutely get to the bottom of this. I had a psychologist come, and the psychologist was so moved by the story. I'll never forget. She was like sick as a dog and came and like did some of the tests just because she felt so passionate that this little girl had tried to kill herself because she felt stupid, she felt dumped on, she felt marginalized. You know, it doesn't matter what the functioning level of someone is. They know the energy of when you're patronizing them or you think they're stupid, right? So the test came back. This little girl, now, if she was SLD, she would have been, her IQ would have been at least 80. Her IQ was 53. So we were able to completely change the course of her life, get her on the alternative assessment, keep her in inclusion, get her some pullout, get her some support in her classroom. And she went from never talking to me and never, you know, like really talking to anyone to feeling really good about herself and thriving because the other school didn't take the time to invest in her and invest in you know, any of the students there. Oh, we'll just stick her, that's the fix, when that wasn't the fix at all. And she was having panic attacks about taking the regular assessment because can you imagine the pressure she felt to read seventh grade passages?
Oh yeah, it would be, it would just be downright cruel to her. I mean, just the self-esteem and just the defeat, it would be a horrible, horrible thing.
Right. You put a child in a classroom and she almost killed herself, yet you take no responsibility for that. I have a problem with that. She wanted to end her life because you gave up on her because it was too much work. So what I tried to do is I tried to help every single child in that situation, but there were so many other problems that were going on in that school that eventually I found myself as the person that was like trying to save everyone, mostly teachers. And it just like, it literally almost collapsed me as a person. And I finally had to say, you know what? Every man for himself when the Titanic is sinking. I have tried to help everyone, but if they won't move, I'm getting in this lifeboat. And I just got in and sailed away. And then afterwards, people were like calling me, like, I miss you, I love you. And I didn't realize everything you did. I'm sorry I criticized you. Can you help me? And I was like, no, I'm sorry, I moved on. And for my own self-preservation, I blocked all their numbers and I moved on. And I have no guilt about that. I tried to help you, but now that I'm free and clear and time has gone on and I've healed and I wrote about it on Medium and that really helped heal me and I've spoken about it. Now I can let it go and move on. And now I'm at peace with what happened because I did the best that I could in a terrible situation. I helped as many students as I can. I took ownership when I made mistakes, right? Sometimes, you know, other mistakes I've made, inadvertently triggering a child, saying something that you don't know is a trigger. And then the child is totally triggered. Like, you know, just even thinking someone's their mom and they're not their mom, you know, thinking about when I'm younger, you know, you don't make that mistake when you're older, but when you're a new teacher and you call someone mom and my mom is in jail, and then the kid's like flipping out, and then you're like, oh my gosh, I just totally devastated this kid. And I talked with their mom in jail, or my mom's dead and you brought her up. And then the kid's like ranting and raving and punching lockers, you know, and then you just say to yourself, you don't say that kid's crazy. What you say is, my gosh, I need to be really careful about the words that I use with children because sometimes we inadvertently trigger them.
Absolutely. Now, I want to kind of go back a little bit about building a
Yeah.
culture. Now, as a sped teacher who originally got my degree in regular education, so I've seen both sides. I know how both sides work. And when you mention how the rivalry and the ego that goes between the two, one of the things that I've noticed in a lot of schools is that regular education these are our 90% of the students. SPED, those are your 10%. You do your thing with them. And I don't find that to be a successful avenue to go to, because all of a sudden we have two schools in one building. So what I have done, and wherever I've worked, is to build that bridge and close that gap. And so with us, we are constantly communicating. So whatever department that we're in, we're always communicating. We're co-teaching, we're planning, we're talking about concerns that we have for the students. And so I really see a lot of selflessness between our department and the other departments in our school. So how can we build that selfless servant way of thinking and actions with our teachers for our students?
I mean, I think it's twofold, because sometimes the leadership is very poor. And when you have a poor leadership, it makes it very difficult. But if you can find at least one ally to start building with, you have a life, right? One friend, you have a life. It's like a lifeline. But I think the problem is that people oversimplify things, and like, if you're not happy at that school, go to another school. And I never give that advice, because you don't know what someone's personal life is. You don't know the situation. How I've like built the culture is, I think it's kind of the same thing that I said the other day on Twitter. I made a comment on Twitter and I said, if no one's answering your post or going to your podcast or commenting on your things or retweeting, ask yourself, have you invested in what they have to say? When I first got on Twitter, just instinct, I was like, everybody that I friended, I was like, okay, let me read everything they say. Let me read their posts. Let me read their articles that they say. Let me read what they wrote. I spent so much time investing in other people and not saying like, hey, I have a PhD. I have 22 years. Like, I went through Katrina. I'm this expert, and, you know, I built my own program. It was more like, okay, here I am with all these people that I've wanted to be around for my entire career. Now I'm around them. What can I learn from them? And then slowly I built relationships with them. And now all of a sudden they're reading my stuff and retweeting. And it got me thinking about the people that post that you never see their name on anything that anyone else does. You never see them interacting with anyone. And then you see their little lone tweet just, you know, go into like cyberspace. So if you want to change the way that you have relationships with people in the building, you need to invest in them. Almost like, you know, how can I be of service to you? Can I make something for you? Can I, you know, help you with this? Can I help you with this lesson plan? Or, oh, you're doing this project, I have construction paper. It's the little things that build trust among people until you can have the big things. And the other part is leadership. And it's a huge thing, because my friend Colleen Winkler built a school from a D- to an A, and she did it by investing in her teachers, giving trust. She used a program called Conscious Discipline, and so there was no screaming in the building, there was no talking down to students, and she modeled this. But what she wound up doing is getting a core group of teachers, and she found Title I money and paid them after school to present PD, so that some of the teachers would make $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 extra a year by creating PD for teachers, and then other teachers would present. And she just sat back and watched what she built. She put the foundation, and then she started letting him build the house till it was an A. And she just retired in December. And now, you know, she said like, all the kids miss her and the teachers miss her. And I just said, you did your part. You built your culture. But she's an example of, the teachers were going to collaborate. They were going to get along. She didn't go to all their meetings to say like, oh, are y'all doing this little checklist? And are y'all doing this and that? She let them create their own little professional learning communities and how they were going to interact with each other and the norms that they wanted and the way they wanted to tackle their grade level. And then sometimes, you know, or their subject level, right? Subject matter. And she integrated her special education teachers in there, and she built that. So if you don't have a Colleen Winkler, then you have to take it upon yourself to use the Tracy Smith, like, common sense, invest in others and they will invest in you approach. Because if you just walk in with like, hey man, like I have all this experience and I just, I have all this to teach you, nobody's hearing that. Nobody's hearing that. But if you walk in and you say, what are you working on? I don't know anything about gifted. Teach me about gifted. And, oh, can I sit in on your class in my free time, my free period? And can I eat lunch with your kids? And if you start building relationships with people, even the hardest, most difficult person is going to eventually come around.
Fantastic. So what are some of those misconceptions? Now, we're sped teachers. This is what we do. We're at this at heart. What are some of the misconceptions that people have about special education teachers? Now, we know regular education teachers are great as well, but it seems that, and at least what I've noticed is that a lot of times they aren't aware of some of the stuff that we have to do behind the scenes. We all know about the paperwork, the communication, data tracking. What are some of the misconceptions that people have about special education teachers and the field in general?
That they're not smart, that they're not capable, that they became a special education teacher because they're not smart enough to be a regular ed teacher, and that they don't do the same level or amount of work. And so there's this misconception like, well, I'm the one that's writing all the lesson plans and they're modifying it. So they're really not doing anything and they're just modifying tests. And I think there's this whole like, look what I have to do versus what you have to do. When really, like you said, there's a lot of things that people don't see. It's kind of like being a stay-at-home mom. There's always been this working mom versus stay-home mom, and people think stay-home moms just have it so easy, and maybe some of them do. Maybe some of them sit around and eat ice cream all day. But the stay-at-home moms that I know, they're very busy. They do a lot of things behind the scenes that nobody knows they do. And my favorite like shows are where like the talk show host makes the husband go into the wife role for like a week, and the wife leaves and goes to the spa. And when she comes back, the husband's like, I'm never going to criticize you again. You're my goddess. I'm going to throw rose petals at your feet. I think I suggested this at a few schools and nobody wanted to do it. And I totally know why. But if for one day or even a week, if there was some role reversals and people became the special education teacher, I think people would stop with their petty jealousy and their comparing what I do to what you do. And it wasn't that hard to become a special education teacher. And I had to do this and that as a regular ed teacher. And you know what? That conversation doesn't interest me. And that whole mindset of I have it worse than you, put you in the victim role, and then I just tune you off, because you can create the life you want. You are not a victim. And so if you think you're a victim and you're a teacher, what kind of energy are you putting in that classroom for your children? You're teaching them to be victims.
Absolutely. Those are all very good points that not a lot of people think about or don't even realize that they're doing until they're called out on it, really. That's what it takes sometimes. I remember I had a teacher that in my previous district just had a horrible, horrible attitude when it came to special education students. I didn't like the way she carried herself. I didn't like the way she would talk to others. And it came to a point, after some requests on my end to help this student, where I had to talk to her one-on-one. And, it was a little contentious, but it needed to be done just because the point wasn't getting across, and that student deserved that opportunity to be successful. And it's on you as that teacher to accommodate that. I'm going to do everything I can to help you. I'm going to provide you the resources and do as much as I can, but that student is in your classroom. And so you're going to have to accommodate and teach that student. So, it's a he could be successful.
I mean, if you don't like Hispanic kids or Black kids or white kids or Asian kids, if you don't like kids that have autism, if you don't like girls, if you don't like boys, if you don't like all children, you really need to sit down and reflect on, maybe it was okay if you were a teacher in 1990, but do you need to be a teacher in 2020? Now we have all of this gender, right? Gender issues, and people are struggling with that. What I would say with that is, don't write people off because they're having a hard time grasping changes. Give people a little grace and time to catch up with people who are transitioning. That's going to take some time. It doesn't mean you're a bad teacher, but it's the energy. If you have the energy of, I want to learn and understand, but I don't really understand, that is a very different energy than, you're wrong, this is horrible. So, for the people that are wrong, this is horrible, what I would just gently say is, you really need to ask yourself if you should be in today's schools. For the people who are like, you know what, I don't understand it, I want to, I'm struggling with it, I'm trying to have compassion, please give people like that time. I have seen Twitter bullying on people who are genuinely trying. You don't have a right to criticize somebody who's genuine in their things that you are not good at. So I think, you bring up like a really good point as far as, just that whole situation and the energy that you bring and your willingness to see the other side, for
Fantastic.
sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, when me and you chat on Twitter, we talk a lot about outlook, positive thinking, positive actions. Okay. And you want to bring that and find teachers who carry that. So, what are some ways that you personally carry those things? And what makes a great teacher in 2020? Because what made a great teacher in 2010, 2005, or even 2000 is very different than what we have now. So it's a two-part question. So what are some of the ways that you live that positive outlook, mindset, and actions? And what's going to make a great teacher in today's world?
I think it's really important to show your vulnerability. People all the time will say things to me like, you have it all together, you have it all figured out. That is not true. The difference is, I've been practicing and putting in practices, spiritual practices, and things to help me align my energy for a very long time. So I'm more proficient at it, and it becomes more natural, and it's more of a practice that I need in my life. But I always tell people, when I'm at work and I'm feeling sideways, I will tell people, and they say, how are you doing? And I'll say, I'm really crabby today, but it has nothing to do with you. That one little phrase that I put in there just liberated somebody from absorbing that energy, because they're saying, you know what, Traci's not having a good day, but she's owning it, and she's probably trying to work on it. But I try to, there's a person, and we maybe can put this in the notes of the podcast, but I have like a PD from a really wonderful spiritual guide of mine named Karen Hager, and she has these sacred space intentions, and sometimes I can just feel that there's something going on at work, and it's sometimes I just say a sacred prayer around having good energy at work and helping me, reach for that higher place and to not be swayed by the negative energy. It would probably be a whole nother show to talk about, the spiritual practices that I personally use to keep myself aligned, but I try to keep myself aligned to my own, spirituality. I would say in 2020, the number one most important thing that you have to do is figure out what authentically education and teaching and learning is to you. You have to figure it out. Don't listen to the wonderful PD speaker that came to your district. Don't listen to your principal. Don't listen to the people on Twitter. Take all of the different resources, read things, and then, take all of those and assimilate them into what you believe is your philosophy, what you believe helps you as an educator guide you in this profession. That means that you have to be flexible. And I think that a lot of teachers are type A, and that is fine, very organized, and they're very regimented, but in today's schools, you might have to put a little flexibility. I think sometimes people don't realize that goalposts on the football field, they sway, right? The Arc in St. Louis, I went in it on a windy day, it sways. That doesn't mean it's not grounded, but sometimes you sway a little bit, and that's okay. And you have to learn how to go with the sway, and just be a little flexible in your thinking and your openness to say, well, I don't understand why there's interracial dating. I don't understand why students have blue hair. I don't understand why this girl is dressing like a boy. As long as you don't put all the judgment into it and you're just questioning it, you're going to come to a good place with it, because you're trying to understand someone else's perspective, which is the cornerstone of like compassion and empathy. So you have to be flexible once you establish your authentic self.
And fantastic. I love it. So you talk about authentic self, and we've talked about, your story, my story, and I'm one of those, if you would, and I said this before we started, if you would have talked to me 3 or probably 4 or so years ago, yeah, I'm the same person, but at the same time, I was totally different. I really battled a lot within myself. I kept things bottled up. I struggle with self-esteem. I struggle with talking to people. Yes, I can go out there and teach and run a classroom and do really, really good at it, but I struggle with that personal part. And so I've always battled depression. It's something I'm going to have to battle probably for the rest of my life, and that's okay. But it's taking those steps. It's being self-aware. If anything, I'm very, almost too much self-aware. I'm able to tell my mom, hey, I'm not feeling such today, or I need to do some stuff to clear my mind, whether it's going outside, whether it's, having these conversations. There's a lot of things that are out there, and there's so many people that want to help you, that want to be there, and that understand, and that are going through the same thing. I always felt that I was the only one going through this, and it turns out that wasn't the case. There's millions of others, and that's perfectly okay. And so, whether it's exercise, yoga, meditation, I go see a shrink, that's okay. There's these things that I have to do and that I want to do that help me be me. And it's opened up so many doors. I'm getting my doctorate. I'm able to have these conversations with people like you and so many others. I have the website, the YouTube channel. I'm so excited of uniting and really helping so many others. It's so much fun, and I love every bit of it.
I mean, I admire you for so many things. I think it's so courageous. And I think it is very important to point out that the reason that so many people gravitate towards you is that you don't use depression, or you weren't the most popular person in high school, or you bottled everything up as a way to justify bad behavior. I have seen people on Twitter with 12,000 followers, and they may say, I have depression and everything, but then they lash out and they're mean and they're belittle. And you know what? Just because you have a mental illness, or just because you're going through a rough patch, you do not have the right to mistreat anyone. And I cannot condone that. And of course you have 12,000 followers, because I am sure there are 12,000 people that feel horrible about themselves and feel much better lashing out. What I love about you is that you are putting a face to depression, and you are saying, yes, I struggle, but I also do this, this, and this helps me. And I know how to look within and understand when I'm feeling imbalanced, and I will never lash out at you because I'm not feeling right. And I think that someone like you isn't going to have 12,000 followers. You're going to have 100,000 followers. The problem is that it's just going to take a little longer for you, because you got to weed out of all that low vibrational energy that is just looking to tear down and rip people apart. And, you know, what I would say to that is, you're the poster child for people do change. And so it's not that those people clawing at the bottom can't change. People change when they want to change, not when someone else says, I'll divorce you if you don't do this, or, you know, make threats on people or make it contingent. People change when they have some kind of awakening, an experience, or they just are tired of being miserable. And you're the poster child for, I wanted to change, I'm changing, and now I'm holding the face of depression and saying, maybe I don't feel good all the time. However, I'm not going to make you feel bad. Maybe I won't push, you know, put all that wonderful energy out today. Maybe I'll just put one little piece of good energy and take the rest of my energy and work on me. Maybe it'll take a week, but I'll eventually come back and put lots of my good energy into Twitter and support my friends. And I think that is why you're such an important person to this community right now, because we need people like you that are taking ownership of their behavior and not using it as an excuse for bad behavior. You are just a wonderful inspiration, and I am, you know, just so happy that we connected.
Absolutely. It's a true honor of mine. And just kind of like the way you've worded it, I don't want people to feel that way. And there is a way out. And it's reaching out. And I would want someone to do the same thing for me. And I've had people reach out, and and I'm always there. I want people to be well. I really do. I want to serve and help people. And I go back to, as a teacher, we can't educate our students if our students aren't well. That's the first thing right there. So is being there, seeing how you are doing, what's going well, what are we struggling with? So it all starts with how you are feeling. If, especially now, you have a student whose parent may have lost their job with COVID-19, they're probably not feeling well. So how can we expect them to complete math when they may run out of money at the end of this month, or their parents are going to have to be at home, and that's not always the best situation because, there could be different things going on. So, it's all about serving others. I love it, both on this platform, Twitter, the website, our conversation, and just writing about it, growing in that and expanding it even more, because this is the time to talk about it. It's 2020. Those stigmas, whoever still holds that stigma is not with the times. That doesn't work. You may have been able to get away with saying, getting, calling out someone on mental illness in the 90s, 2000s, but those days are over. You can't do it. And so just being there and being that servant, being a leader in the school setting, that's where We Are One Team comes from, because we are all in this together. SPED, gifted, alternative, AP, regular education, we are all in this together. That's our parents, that's our students, that's our custodians, our secretaries. All of us are in this together. And when we all pull on the same rope, we really go far. And as a leader, it's my job to help you do your job even better. You do it great, but we can do it even better. And I know that for a fact. And so it's really about having that outlook, that drive to do this, and you can really do it. So.
Yes, and I would like to say that, on Medium, I've gotten away from writing about the corruption, but a
Mhm.
lot of the people that I discussed, They all went on to better lives. They all went on to better lives, and good things happened for them, the ones that were wronged. And the other ones, it's just none of my business. Other people's paths are none of my business. I just know that I can't be a part of corruption. I can't be a part of, hatred. I can't be a part of bullying. And all I can do is be a part of all of the good things, like we are one team and we are together and one world and Project Kakuma and all the other projects that I support. All I can do is be a part of something that makes sense to me. But ask yourself, when you're being mean, and we've all been mean, nobody on this planet has never been mean. When you're being mean and when you're being angry, do you feel good about yourself? Versus when you're loving and adoring and like giving people compliments and respect and trusting people, do you feel good about yourself? I personally know that when I've had behavior, even when it's like advocating for kids, but I get so frustrated and mad and angry and let myself lose control, the only person that's suffering is me. The other person on the other side of the desk is going to go on writing their memo, even though I've given this passionate whole half-hour talk on why the district isn't supporting my students. But if I take that emotional charge out and then I just give the facts, I can walk out of the office and say, you know what, I did my part, but now I can go on with my day and I don't have to like unpack this anger.
Absolutely. So one of the few other things that I want to touch base with you is that how can I, or even others who believe in what you are doing and what we are doing, how can we, or how can I support you?
Well, actually, right now, it's funny because you and I have talked off camera about sort of like, the world right now is kind of having their own awakening when they're starting to realize that there's no separation and that money or class or race or gender is not, um, you know, like anyone who felt like there was a separation. There's no separation now because COVID is getting everyone. And so part of like what's happening for me right now is I'm sort of like in the process of like revamping like my entire everything. I'm revamping like what I want to write about. I'm revamping like the book that I was writing. I'm revamping my website. I'm revamping like services that I'm offering. So I'm sort of like in a transition because what I'm seeing and what people are DMing me about is that people want to learn more about spiritual practices. People want to learn more about how they can stay like in Katrina, there's stop signs and there's wind and there's rain and there's hail and there's all this stuff going on. The stop sign, when the water's receded, is still standing there and everything else is demolished. So how can you be that pillar no matter what happens? You might sway a little bit, but you're not going to fall over. And so now really what I'm doing is I'm working on revamping what I'm going to be offering people because I really want to be the person that says, A, I don't have it all figured out, but B, I've been on this trajectory for half my life, since my early 20s. And I really want to teach you what I know so that you can feel empowered in your life and you don't feel like you're always going to be a victim to your emotions or that you're always going to be this reactive person. So for me right now, I would say, I have a website, tracinicolesmith.com, but it is in the process of being totally revamped because even though Katrina transformed me, COVID-19 is also transforming me, and it's showing me the need that I need to be able to be more of a spiritual light in the education and therapy world, not just somebody who offers knowledge or experience or practical tools that will help them in the classroom. What about you?
How can I serve you?
No, how can you serve everyone else?
You
You
know,
serve me by,
you know,
just being
it,
you.
yeah, it's being present. That's the most important thing. If you're present, you're consistent, people know that you're going to be there for them. As I've grown into my practice with with meditation and my outlook, and really surrounding myself with people that help me grow. I'm one of those people that I need to be pushed. I like to be coached. I welcome feedback, and I'm going to be aware of that. And I'm going to take it and I'm going to use it. If I'm a big baseball guy. So if I'm struggling throwing a curveball, I'm going to have someone showing my grip, and I'm going to work on it so I throw it better for a strike. Okay. So I welcome that. And like I said, it's being present, it's serving people, it's coaching, not only as a professional, but as a person. It's growing into that. It starts with you. It starts with your outlook on things. Okay. Because there's two things you can control. I tell my students this, I tell my athletes this: attitude and effort. Yes, there's people that are going to wrong you. Yes, there's bad people that come into your life, but you have control of how you react. Okay. As long as you bring your best attitude, your best effort, you can grow. You can get better. I've had some bad people along the way. I could have let it bring me down. And at times I felt like I was being brought down, but I was able to make that change. Okay. So really emphasize that attitude, your effort, your outlook, and it's the people you surround yourself. You want to be around people that are going to help you grow, not only as a professional, but as a person. So most importantly, keep growing as an individual, help people grow as people and as professionals, and just be that person that is there for them.
Let me say one other thing before we end this wonderful conversation, which is there is a lot of narcissism in the spiritual world. There are big powerhouse publishing companies that are out there with some big name people that are selling books, especially with the law of attraction. There are a lot of people that are living this life on camera, but behind closed doors, their lives are a mess.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to caution everybody about the type of people that you follow and the type of people that you are attracted to, and caution anyone against people that are telling you that if you try harder and you really focus on something that you can make it happen. Because let me tell you something, you can manifest from ego, but if you manifest from ego rather than the divine will of God, then it can go anytime. How many millionaires have gone bankrupt? Why do you think that is? Because anyone can manifest. So I just want to caution people that you want to align yourself with spiritual teachers who actually embody the type of person that you want to be, and they live a life that is authentic. There are so many people right now that are like on TV trying to convince you of all the things that you can do if you just buy these hundreds of dollars of courses and listen to what they're saying. That is not the case. So please, anyone who is going through any type of spiritual awakening or who am I, what is my purpose, let me please caution you not to be seduced by the big names in the spiritual world, because the majority of them are manifesting from ego and they're not aligned to what the spiritual practices that they're telling you are not the ones that you want to learn.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. It's really finding what's right for you rather than what's selling at Barnes and Noble. Yes, there's some good materials, but you have to understand, we have to understand what we need and what's going to work for us. What may work for me may not work for my sister. Okay. But it's finding what you need and finding those authentic resources and then live in that. Because once you're able to live it authentically, you're going to continue to grow.
Right. And if your goal is, I want to manifest $1 million, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to buy, and I'm not going to throw any of these authors under the bus, but there's a new book where this author is talking about how you can be a like super duper like conduit for money and prosperity and all this other stuff. No. If you're putting that desperate energy into what you're trying to create in your life, you are going to get something on the back end that is terrible. The front end energy has to be clear. It has to be authentic. It has to be pure. It has to be something that is from the heart, from compassion, helping humanity. When you come from that place and you're not coming from, I know, but you don't understand. I have to pay all my bills and I'm going to lose everything. All of that fear, all of that lack is getting put into that manifestation. So please make sure that if you are in that place, what you really need to work on is grounding yourself and being able to release that fear before you can come to a place to create something that is going to be beautiful and authentic and lasting, and something that will make you prosperous from the inside.
Absolutely. It's all about insight. That's going to be the next topic of our conversation. We talk about our practices and how to cultivate that compassion and gratitude and empathy. Last thing I want to get to you, I want to ask you is, I'm all about we are one team. What does that mean to you?
If you would have asked me this a long time ago, I would have been thinking very communal based and like my community and all about like special education and, kids with disability. But after finding global education and, really aligning myself with the UN and the sustainable development goals that they have for 2030 and all the inspirational people like Kuhn Timmers, and then like the great teachers like Donna and Kirsten and Julia, and I mean, I could just go on and on about them, Lynn, but Braca, I don't want to leave anyone out, but there's just so many teachers right now that are just like implementing these practices. And what they're doing is they're teaching this concept that children are solutionary. So not just that you're solutions based, but that children are the key to solving a lot of the global problems. So my answer, and that comes from Zoe Wild, Institute for Humane Education. So my big thing about We Are One Team is look at COVID, right? If this hasn't taught you that we are all, every single human being, plant, animal, every piece of life on the planet right now is going through the same thing. We are all on one team. Everybody wants the same thing. Everybody wants to be healthy, happy, be able to travel, eat good food, their children to be successful, be in a good marriage, contribute something to the world, have a purpose-filled life. Everybody wants the same thing, just not everybody has the same resources. So we are all in this together. Please try to work on whatever it is that you have as a stereotype. Please try to work on that within yourself and dismantle that, because we all want the same thing. We are all in this together, and our planet really needs us. Our children really need us. Our plants need us. Our animals need us. Our rocks need us. Our earth needs us. So we really have to look at one team as the planet Earth. And maybe even also today I watched a webinar on Mars, maybe even the universe. And what is the earth and all of our toxic poisons that are like spewing out of the earth? What are we doing to the atmosphere? So we're all on the same team. And the team is to have a really good life and to contribute something to the world that's all about sustaining something for the next generation.
Fantastic. Beautifully said. We're all contributing something. You are, I am. There's so many others that we are connected with that are doing so, and we're just going to keep inspiring. So I cannot thank you enough for coming on. We could talk for even longer if we wanted to, but we're going to do that next time. And we're going to go off the record and have a couple follow-ups for you, okay? So hope you have a great night. And yeah.